Konnichiwa. Today we're looking at the RYK ALGO. What is this? As we all know, FM synthesizers are renowned for offering an intuitive, hands-on, fun sound design experience, which is why during the 1980s everyone put their mini-moogs in the bin. Analog synths had a problem. Being so laden with knobs meant it was often very difficult to choose which one to turn at any one time, and so FM synthesizers were born. No longer could you be confused about which knob to interact with because there weren't any. And so it was quite surprising to see that RYK bucked the top-selling 80s trend and instead decided to put knobs onto a FM module. For some insane reason, it was felt that this might offer a more intuitive, menu-free, fun way to play with FM. RYK even went as far as to hire me to make this video explaining this module to you as if you don't know how FM synthesizers work. And of course, FM synthesis is taught in schools. Even a 5-year-old can knock up a reasonable approximation of a crumb horn on a DX7 with operators to spare. But in the unlikely event that you need a small reminder, please feel free to keep watching. Here's how it works. The RYK ALGO has 4 oscillators. And the principle of FM synthesizers is that we use one oscillator to change the sound of another oscillator. Oscillators that carry sound into our ears are called carriers. And oscillators that don't are called modulators. Now we choose an algorithm with the red button and cycle through them. Algorithms are displayed with this gorgeously cool, retro-futuristic LED grid, which is showing us which oscillators we can hear and which ones are affecting the ones that we can hear. If I reverse this to the most basic algorithm of all, that is, no links between the oscillators, then I come to these tiny little dials, which are volume knobs. And if I turn them up, we hear a lovely 4 oscillator drone. And if I change these big dials, these are the frequency dials for each of the 4 oscillators. You can hear there's a kind of stepping occurring here, and this is because the oscillators sort of step to harmonic intervals which work well together for creating FM patches. So if I push the ALGO button, we see a link has been drawn. And if we do that again, another link has been drawn. Now, if I turn this one down and this one down, we hear no sound at all because we are hearing the lowest oscillator that is connected up here at the top. If I turn up this bottom one and then this, we hear 2 sounds together. But if I turn up this, or this, I don't hear anything. Now, you might think I've turned these up and I should be hearing the influence, but there's an XM cross-modulation dial, which is an overall control for the amount of modulation happening. And so if I do that with just one oscillator, here's the sine wave, we've got this turned down and XM turned down. If I turn this up and then turn up XM, we can see just about how one bends the other. We get a kind of saw wave here, but we're doing it with just 2 sine waves. And if we change the frequency of that modulating oscillator, we get a different sound, different sound, different sound, and so on. And then if we were to modulate that volume control, which we do with these M inputs here, they let us modulate either the volume or the pitch, we can change that, of each of the oscillators. And that's kind of the principle. An oscillator modulates another oscillator to make more complicated sounds. And in this algorithm here, we're going to get 2 oscillators that make sound. That's 4 and 3. And we're going to be able to use 2 to change both of them. And we're able to use 1 to change 2, which is changing both of them. Oh, I almost felt a kind of down bass guitar going on. And I think the key with this is to use relatively low modulation values, why it's useful to have a global cross-modulation amount, to just keep things a bit more subtle. It's obviously easy to make hellscapes with this thing. But once we have a sound, the interest becomes in how we modulate that sound to get different results. So if I were to take some kind of cycling LFOs and feed them in, this then becomes an attenuator for the control input. And at the moment, it's controlling the volume. But if I hold the algorithm button, the red button, and plug this in, by holding the button when I plugged it in, it now becomes a pitch control. Interesting, isn't it? Unplug that, plug it back in, now it becomes a volume control. Wow. Now I've got 2 LFOs modulating my modulators. Now this button at the top is an octave selector, cycles up and down. So in this way we can build a sound and then modulate it. However, there's actually an even quicker way that we can change the sound, which are these interesting dials. One is called warp, the other is called fold. So with regards to warp, FM synthesizers traditionally, although not latterly, would be built with just sine waves. These are the only sounds that the oscillators or operators made, and you made more complex sounds by modulating them with other operators. However, if we just hear oscillator 1 and we turn the warp dial, we warp the oscillator into a saw or into a square wave. You'll have to believe me, that's actually what a square wave looks like, without the need for other operators or oscillators. So then, if we start with everything being saw waves, and then modulate that with our modulators, we have a very, very different sonic language to play with. And if you plug something into this then becomes an attenuator. Very nice. And by the way, if we hold the red button, we can turn the dial and use it to choose whether we warp the modulators or the carriers or both. You can choose which set get warped. And this third thing is called fold. And folding is wavefolding, both symmetrically, asymmetrically, or a form of clipping. So if we do symmetric, it creates nice, even symmetric wavefoldings, which sound lovely. Or if we do asymmetric, and you hold this dial and move it into the middle position, you get a slightly weirder asymmetric version. A bit hard to see on here, but hopefully you get my point. Different shape with a different sound. And then the third one is soft clipping, which squares off the sound. Woof. You get a very driven, warm sound. Kind of an effect. And there is a third effect in here. This dial's function is to detune everything, which makes everything sound huge and colossal. But if we hold the red dial while turning it, we get a nice 80s chorus sound with a variable LFO rate. Lovely. Now in a DX7, you wouldn't just get an oscillator, you'd also get an envelope that controlled the volume of that oscillator. And we don't have envelopes built in with this. You have the 4 modulation inputs to the 4 oscillators. And the idea is that you roll your own. You feed envelopes in here to dynamically control these over time, or LFOs, or step sequences, all of which we're going to do. Now you also have a CV input for that nice overall cross mod, and you also have a CV input for the amount of FM, detune, or sync. Sync resets the cycles of all of the oscillators, which is useful if you're doing very low bassy things to avoid getting a kind of click at the start of a sound. And to change this, you hold the red button while inserting a cable, and that's it. There's no presets or other sort of back-end ephemera, with the exception of these like push-hold modifiers. One where you hold the red button and turn the dial to get free tuning, but there is another one, which is if you hold the black button and turn the dial, then it will fix the pitch of that oscillator. This is the same thing as fixed mode in FM synths, and if you put modulators in fixed mode, it's just good for making kind of clangorous things, where it will stay at that pitch no matter what you feed into the 1 volt per octave input. And there's a couple of other cheeky things, which is if you hold the red button and turn the volume dials, then in fact it will pan the oscillators in a way that is very pleasing. So now this one's in one side and that's in the other side, and then we can modulate them and turn up the XM amount for stereo FM fun. Good times. Now those envelope poor of you who may not have very many envelopes might be like, oh man, so I've got to have like 4 envelopes just to, gate the whole thing entirely. But there's actually a final expert feature I'm going to talk about, which is that if you hold down the black button and plug a cable into M4, like this, it will then act as a global VCA. So that input now gates the entire module. It's very useful if you just want to make it respond conveniently to one envelope or LFO. Good times. So you have 4 oscillators. You can modulate them with all kinds of different algorithms. You can overall control the cross mod, detune them, add chorus. You can warp them, fold them many different ways. You can CV control a lot of these processes, octave shift it, and then there are special hold the dial and either insert the cable or turn the control to get the finessing that you may need for any one particular patch. Oh yes, mate. So now you understand FM synths. Well done. And I think we should now make some music. I've got RYK's M185, a bunch of other modules, and we can just enjoy ambient bliss and face melting hellscapes. Come on then. Oh. So here we have a nice like noodly 185 sequence, and we can have 2 oscillators audible. Of course they're sine waves. And we can use the warp to change them immediately into something else. And kind of use the warp a bit like a filter control. That's effectively what it is. We start with a more muffled sound, and we make it pointier and less filtered sounding. We can also fold it. And effectively, this cluster of 3 knobs here becomes like the overall tone control for quick changes. We can just change the overall cross mod amount, or the warp, or the fold, to very quickly get a change, which is very nice. Of course, I can CV control that. Why don't I CV control XM with a step sequencer? Woof. Turn this down a bit. Nice. 5 steps, so it phases interestingly. Cheers, Don Hoopla. And then by changing the amplitude of the modulating oscillators, we can have things that happen at different times. I think we need a slow LFO on that. Who am I to deny my little friend one of those? I've got loads kicking around. And reduce the warp and fold. Pan one left, pan one right. Time can be had by all if you feed envelopes into the folder mount. Gets you to very boucle territory. We can try the other asymmetric. That sounds more vocal. That's an impression of it, just for you there. I like that. Symmetric. Filth. Yeah, mate. There's a little subtle ambience with algorithm 5 and envelope controls oscillator 3. Increase the repeats. keeping it low and slow. Find a happy medium where you don't really need an external filter. Of course, you can totally run it through a filter, make lots of like hellscapes, and then filter them. Now we've got the LFOs from the bootler controlling oscillators 1 and 2, creating that chorusy effect. How about more? Then we can free tune the 3 audible oscillators. This one is a modulator. I hold the red button. Gets us into like clang territory quite quickly. To like a force multiplier. If you whatever weirdness you've got on here, you always get something more interesting if you twist these. You always twist them back. What makes them nice and performative. Yes. Woof. Goodness. Changing how much LFO goes into that modulating oscillator 1 creates that squeak. Wavefolding FM, it's a trip. That is algorithm 0, just one big sweet 4-note chord. Kind of fun having this big fat stereo. Slang. M185 just bringing the riffs. Using a step sequencer to vary the decay time, makes all the difference in the world. Warping a little. Get a lot of tonal variation just by warping and folding. It's nice, isn't it? Warp and fold it. That made the hairs on my legs stand up. Always a good sign. Not the ones on the back of my neck, the ones on my legs. Yeah, mate. Gating it. Flipping heck. Oh. Yes. 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 Now we're step sequencing the XM control, the cross mod of the carriers in this instance, but I could change that to everything. It's delightful letting it growl. Pretty sexy, that. Quite a fan of the growly, like, filth electro. Oh. That low purr, that's nice. That is nice. Oh my great goodness. Yeah. Like that a lot. Shit, man. Wicked.